thought about this day many times. What will I say? Will it really make an impact to a monster, a predator, a murderer, a rapist, a thief, a coward? I hope every time you close your eyes, your mind is filled with nightmares, and you never have rest.
Harsh words for the killer of a Louisiana mother who took her 2 young daughters to another state before murdering one of them as well. Daniel Callihan admitted to his crimes in open court and then had to listen as the judge and the victim's sister berated him for his cruel and senseless actions. We're going to take a look at some of the biggest moments from Callihan's guilty plea and sentencing hearing with a criminal defense attorney who has experience in this area to get some insight into what it must have felt like inside that courtroom. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Daniel Wayne Callihan will spend the rest of his life in prison, and honestly, he should. Why? Because he committed a series of unthinkable crimes. He stabbed a former lover to death, kidnapped her 2 daughters, who were only 4 and 6 years old, took them across state lines from Louisiana to Mississippi before taking the 4-year-old's life as well. An Amber Alert was issued for Erin and Jaylee after their mom, Callie Brunett, was found dead in her Laurentier, Louisiana home in June of 2024. According to the Clarion Ledger, Callie was found by her father on the floor of her bedroom inside of a locked mobile home. Horrifically, the Clarion Ledger reports that Callie had been stabbed approximately 50 times. Coroner noting stab wounds to her head, neck, chest, abdomen, back, defense wounds on her arms. And those girls were nowhere to be found. But then Jackson police say both girls were found on June 13, 2024, more than 120 miles away from that first crime scene. Jaylee was found alive but hurt. The Clarion Ledger reports that tragically her younger sister, Erin, was found dead just a few feet away from asphyxiation. Police Chief Joseph Wade delivered the somber update to the media.
Tragic scene that we're working here in South Jackson. Jackson police officers were called to 3950 Bossier to assist the U.S. Marshals. They have been looking for an individual wanted out of Louisiana, Mr. Callihan. After a short pursuit, they made contact with him and he's now in custody. As you know, an Amber Alert was issued for 2 young children that were supposedly with him. Mr. Callihan is also a suspect in a homicide that happened in Tangible Hope Parish, Louisiana. Upon a search of the area by Jackson police officers, they located a deceased child in the woods. We suspect that to be one of the children that he had in his possession, that he had illegally taken away from Tangible Hope Parish in Louisiana. One of the child, the 6-year-old, my understanding, has been taken to the hospital to receive treatment, but my understanding the 4-year-old is deceased in the woods. We're still trying to determine the manner of death, but we have a very active scene here right now, very traumatic scene, very tragic scene, the death of a 4-year-old child, but the suspect is in custody.
Now we have that suspect. That suspect, who would end up facing charges in 2 states as well as federal court, was identified as Daniel Callihan, who the Clarion Ledger says had been in an on-again, off-again relationship with Callie. Now, if we go back to Jaylee, when she was found, she was rushed to a hospital and eventually she was reunited with family members. But as multiple law enforcement agencies dug further into this case, they discovered just how much this 6-year-old had endured. And by the way, I should say what she has to continue to endure. She has the loss of her mother and sister. Now, a factual basis document that was filed by the federal government as part of Callihan agreeing to plead guilty states the following, quote, "The government would further prove through the introduction of forensic and digital evidence, eyewitness testimony, and the testimony of medical professionals that on or about June 12, 2024, Callihan traveled from Macomb, Mississippi to Amet, Louisiana, within the Eastern District of Louisiana, in adult victim 1's vehicle for the purpose of picking up co-conspirator 1. We're going to talk about that. Minor victim 1 and minor victim 2 were present in the vehicle. Once in Amet, Callihan connected with co-conspirator 1. Callihan and co-conspirator 1 then drove minor victim 1 and minor victim 2 in the vehicle Callihan stole from adult victim 1 to a residence located at 3950 Bossier Drive, Jackson, Mississippi. That co-conspirator, by the way, is Victoria Cox. According to state and federal prosecutors, both Cox and Callihan sexually abused this 6-year-old girl in a hotel. Callihan admitted that he then suffocated the 4-year-old. And to make matters worse, the allegation was she was suffocated while she was crying for her mother. Sickening to talk about. Now, these girls were found in a wooded area. Erin was dead. Jaylee was injured. And according to Jackson's police chief, there was possible evidence of human trafficking found at the scene, including small animal cages. According to WJTV, Jackson police contacted the human trafficking divisions of the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation and also Hinds County to assess the scene. It took them 3 days to fully process it. And ahead of his trials, Callihan was eager to speak with reporters.
I would like to hear Brunett. Unfortunately, on Lexapro, sober, no drugs in my system, I did.
Why?
Why did you kill the 3-year-old girl?
I have no reason for what I did. All I know is I want to say I was sober and only on Lexapro and off Lexapro, and I'm also diagnosed borderline with multiple personality disorder. And I have not got to come to a lawyer, and I'm on suicide watch, but I'm not suicidal. But I think it was the side effects of the Lexapro.
Did you kill her mom?
His mom.
Erin's mom.
I'm at Rankin County Jail if y'all would like an interview.
Do you regret what you did?
Completely.
You regret what you did?
I would kill me, and I have told them everything that I did, and I have agreed to not fight it. Speedy trial. Whatever it is.
You hope for the death penalty?
For what I did, lethal injection is the easiest thing for me.
Yeah, so Lexapro is an antidepressant used to treat depression, anxiety. It's unclear why Callihan referred to it specifically. But Callihan's apparent wish for the death penalty, that would not come true. No, instead, he entered a guilty plea in both Louisiana and Mississippi courts, plus federal court. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, which I will tell you is not going to be easy. Now, we wanted to bring this case to you, and the reason that we can do that is because of the support that we get from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, our sponsor. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they're so big? Because they win a lot. They have recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. Think about that. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not start a claim? Fight for what you deserve. Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. In a federal court in New Orleans in early August, he pleaded guilty to charges of kidnapping resulting in death, transportation of a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. In exchange for his plea deal, the federal government agreed not to seek the death penalty. So then on Friday, September 26th, he entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder out in Louisiana State Court. The following Monday, he pled guilty to capital murder, sexual battery, 2 counts of kidnapping. We're going to talk about this, okay? So we're going to talk about just this horrific case. We're going to examine what the judge, the defendant, the victim's family had to say during sentencing, and I want to do it with criminal defense attorney Mauricio Padilla. Mauricio, thank you so much for coming back here on Sidebar. This is just a terrible case. This is just a terrible story. And one of the things that makes this case so chilling is how easily it seems Callihan was able to commit some of the most brutal crimes that we've talked about, all at once, by the way. And you have this kind of nonchalant response to the whole thing. What's your take on it?
I mean, I know one of his responses was like, "Nah, I was on Lexapro. I'm sober. I did it." It's pretty shocking that a state like Louisiana gave him this deal. When you're looking at crimes that are this shocking, this perverse, and in a state like Louisiana, I think that good lawyering came into play or something, because I would have expected them to press the death penalty in a case like this.
You mentioned lawyering. So Callihan's attorney, Callie Brunett, told reporters in early August that, you know what, Callihan, he was prepared to take responsibility saying, quote, "That was 14 months ago. I think you saw Daniel Callihan that day in the condition he was in. For the last 14 months, he's been in a secure environment where he's been getting good nutrition, he's been getting proper medication, and you saw a completely different man today." What's your reaction to that?
People don't care. People, if you kill a child, I mean, that's worse than killing a police officer. If you kill a child, the majority of people want you dead, period. They don't want you to get life. The majority of people are upset at this story. The majority of people are upset at the fact that he avoided a death penalty. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've had to represent people that are faced with the death penalty. So I am against the death penalty, but I'm the exception. And I think in a state like Louisiana, I'm imagining that they're getting a lot of pushback from people that think that the only fair sentence for someone that committed the horrific crimes that he did is to die. Now, I'll tell you this, he's going to be doing life in a maximum security prison in the worst place in the United States. Being in prison in Louisiana is horrific. And it's way worse than being in prison, in my opinion, in any other state. I have had clients that have pled to federal charges just to try to avoid state charges in Louisiana. So it's known as being a really difficult place to do your time. And when you're doing your time, and your time includes the brutal murder of a young child, your life is never going to really be safe, especially in a place like Louisiana.
I was going to get to the sentence, but actually, why is that? Is it just the conditions are so bad? It's violent? By the way, no one, like you said, no one's going to be having sympathy for this guy. But just curious, why is it so bad there?
Well, I mean, okay, first of all, Louisiana has, is like, I think number 3 right now in murders, but historically it was number 1. I'm talking about for like decades. It had the worst crime rate. So you have a jail that's overpopulated, and it's overpopulated with violent crime. So they have the most murders, they have the most murderers, budget restrictions. Louisiana's not a rich state by any means. It's one of the more impoverished states. So that trickles down to the correction system. So if you have a state that's already struggling to make ends meet and you end up in jail there, it's not a comfortable place to be in. In addition, it's a hard place, and it's a place where I don't think that the corrections officers are going to have much sympathy or even like care what really happens to this guy. I will be shocked if he does his time without any type of repercussions from other inmates.
So let's talk about what happened to this guy. Okay, let's take a closer look at what happened in a Jackson, Mississippi courtroom on September 29th. Now, I'm going to warn you, the audio from the courtroom is not the best quality, but take a listen to this first part.
He will raise his right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth of God?
Yes, sir.
Now you know there is no right of an appeal of a guilty plea, and that the judgment of this court will be the final judgment. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
The court wants to ask, have you received any threats? Has anyone forced you or coerced you or promised you anything to plead guilty on today?
No.
Now, Mauricio, a couple things there. As she's reading him his rights and making sure he understands what it means to enter into a guilty plea, why is that so significant? Have you ever seen a situation before where it looks like, on the record, on paper, you have a criminal defendant who accepted a guilty plea, admitted guilt, but then later down the road, you have attorneys who say, hey, he didn't really know what he was giving up. He wasn't properly informed by his attorney. He wasn't properly informed by the court. I mean, have you ever seen a guilty plea actually be reversed?
I personally haven't done it, but I've seen people attempt to do it, and I've seen people actually do it. It's popular in the sense that a lot of people try and absolve themselves of guilty pleas when they're trying to deal with immigration consequences. So some people are like, you pled guilty 5 years ago to a felony, and all of a sudden they want to deport you for it. So it's popular to see people try and go back and say, hey, I didn't know what I was pleading to. So then there's a string of cases that came out of, and I think it's actually my last name. I think it's Padilla was the defendant. But after that case, judges, at least in Florida, really started to tighten up the colloquy. So now when they ask you the series of questions, it includes, do you know that if you plead guilty, you will be deported? In federal cases, it's the same. They want to take as much time as they can to ask you every single question about whether you're under duress, whether anybody's promised you anything, whether you know that there's immigration consequences. They want to check off all the boxes to avoid someone in the future saying, I didn't know this particular subject matter regarding my guilty plea, and because I didn't know it, I should have my guilty plea taken away. Now, when you're dealing with a murder, when you're dealing with capital crime where you can get the death penalty, all of that is enhanced because they really want to make sure that you can't, later on try and challenge your guilty plea because of the severity of the crime.
By the way, talk to me what it's like being in a courtroom during a guilty plea. I imagine that it's incredibly intense, especially if loved ones of the victim are present. But I also have to imagine there's a sense of relief. This chapter's coming to an end. You don't go to trial. It might be relief for a defendant, for family members. Talk to me about what it's like to be in a courtroom for that.
Listen, it's difficult in the sense that usually if you're doing a guilty plea and your client was looking at the death penalty, really the most difficult thing is the victims and the victim's family. Because even if you're a criminal defense attorney and you're representing somebody that's charged with a horrific crime, we're human. And when you look at them, you can tell, first of all, there's no closure. When someone's family members are murdered and they're victimized like that, a guilty plea or even someone getting killed by the state, like an actual execution, that really doesn't bring solace. So you come face to face with the reality of these people are suffering, and they're suffering just like they were suffering the day that this murder occurred. So for me, the most difficult thing is not my client, but having to observe that pain is still out there and that pain still exists. That's pretty much the most difficult part. Now, I've had to do guilty pleas where, my clients were, jumping on a life sentence, or and their families are present. And I'm not saying that it's easy when you're dealing with my own clients and their families, but really the most difficult part for everybody, for the judge, for the prosecutor, for criminal defense, is coming face to face with the pain of the family.
Now, I want to be clear about something. Even though this judge is reading him his rights and making sure he understands, as she questioned Callihan before imposing the sentence, Judge Deborah Gibbs didn't hold back. She told him that this was one of the worst cases that she had ever seen from the bench.
This is one of the most horrific crimes that I've had to preside over. It's my duty and responsibility to give defendants a fair and impartial hearing, and I've done so today. The crimes in which you are pleading guilty to: capital murder, kidnapping, sexual battery against victims who were the age of 4 and 9, and against the scientists I stated earlier are some of the most horrific crimes that I've had to endure since taking the bench. I hope this will be my last, if at all possible. However, it is my responsibility to ensure the safety of the public in rendering my verdict. I understand that the state has also spoken with the family, and they're trying to also take into consideration their wishes, which is why they have made the recommendation that they've made.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And Judge Gibbs also assured that despite the despicable cruelty that Callihan committed upon his victims, he was in his right mind and aware of the consequences of his guilty plea.
And when I read the crimes that was committed against the victims, my first inquiry was, had there been a mental competency? I want the court to know that, the family to know that. Because to me, the atrocities that took place on that day among those children, I want to make sure that the person standing in front of me was mentally competent to stand trial, and that's our responsibility in the judiciary as well. And I have verification that Ms. Callihan is competent to be here today. Therefore, the sentence that I'm going to impose today will be a recommendation along with the recommendation of the family, which is to count 1, capital murder. Ms. Callihan will be in prison for life without the possibility of parole, to be served in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections. Count 2, 30 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, with all 30 years to be served. Count 3, 30 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, but those count 2 and 3 be served on each of those counts. Count 4 deals with sexual battery. Ms. Callihan will be in prison for life. And the Mississippi Department of Corrections also for court. Count 5 for sexual battery to be in prison for life. And Mississippi Department of Corrections, those sentences will be imposed today and will be served consecutively to each other. These sentences will also be served consecutively to the life sentence that's already been imposed by the 21st Judicial District Court State of Louisiana.
So just in case you didn't catch that, Callihan was sentenced to life in prison on the capital murder and sexual battery charges, 30 years for each of the kidnapping charges. That sentence will run consecutively to the lifetime sentence handed down in Louisiana, as well as his federal sentence of life, which is expected to be handed down in a hearing later this year. And according to the court, Callihan will essentially live the rest of his life in the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola. So, Mauricio, you talked about how bad that is, but also how much of an impact is it to when you have someone who's sentenced to these multiple life terms? Yes, in a way, it doesn't change the practical reality of what he's going to be going through, but it is symbolic. It is important nonetheless, because isn't it saying we are treating each charge individually, we're treating each sentence individually. It's not grouping it all together. It's he's being sentenced for the crimes that he committed.
Yeah, it's important because that way, you know, everybody that's looking can say, okay, this is the crime that you were convicted of. This is the appropriate sentence for that crime. So I agree with you. And also to have a judge like Judge Gibbs that's dealing with felony court in a place like Louisiana, for her to say that it's the most horrific, that's saying something. I'm talking about, I know prosecutors that got hired after Katrina just to do murders. And this is not just one. They hired a fleet of experienced prosecutors that their job was just to deal with murders, just to give you an idea of the number of murders that came after Katrina in Louisiana. So it's not like a judge that practices in a normal place. For her to make that distinction that this is one of the most horrific crimes, that's really saying something coming from someone like her. If you're saying that he's going to Angola, that is definitely the worst prison in the United States. I don't think that there's ever been a question about that. And it's been the worst for like the past 30 years. Or 40 years. So he's really going to the worst place, charged with the worst crimes. And when you think about the decision that the family made, I agree with it, because if they would have not made this offer, this was going to have to go to trial, which would have been the victim's family would have had to be drawn through the entire process of the trial, the media that accompanies it, the appeals. Even though I said that there's never really closure when you're victimized in a crime of this nature, but this could have dragged out 10, 15 years. So at least with this, they could try and move on and not have it continuously in their head for the next decade or decade and a half.
Talking about the family, so Callie's sister, Brandy Hosh, spoke on behalf of her family at Callihan's hearings in both Louisiana and Mississippi. Just take a listen to this.
I am the sister of Callie and an aunt to Aaron. I'm speaking today on behalf of my mom, dad, and myself. I speak these words again, hoping they echo in your mind, the way your actions echo in our lives. Here in Mississippi, he took the life of a precious, innocent baby. He stripped another defenseless child of peace and innocence. They had no way to fight for themselves, so we carried their voices for them. I have thought about this day many times. What will I say? Will it really make an impact to a monster, a predator, a murderer, a rapist, a thief, a coward? All of the things that you are. You have not only stolen Callie and Aaron's lives from us, but you have stolen innocence, peace, and life from our family. The hole you have left behind cannot be filled, and the pain that you have caused reaches far beyond any words I can say. We are forever changed in the worst possible way because of you. You have no limits, no soul. You are a demon. Not one single day goes by that we are not sad, lost, angry, or sickened because of you. I hope every time you close your eyes, your mind is filled with nightmares, and you never have rest. I hope every time you wake, you have nothing to ever look forward to again. When you look down at your own two hands, I hope you can't unsee what they have done. Those two hands tortured and violently took the life of a daughter, a mom, a sister, and a friend, and the last breath of a 4-year-old innocent baby. You took her life because she was scared and crying her protector, her world. This cannot be undone, forgotten, forgiven, or even coped with. I hope you never have a single moment of peace in your life. As I watch my niece try to navigate her life with no mom, no sister, and no best friend, it sickens me that you get to live. Let's be clear, Daniel. Your life is being spared for one reason only, to protect my niece from ever having to see you again. You don't deserve this grace. I watch my niece looking at photos of her mom and sister. Photos, because that's all we have left because of you. She has asked me, Nanny, will he pay for what he's done to my mom and my sister and me? And we have promised her, yes, he will pay. You may not get the death penalty today, but you will pay. I trust in this. The Apostle Paul states clearly, do not take revenge, but leave room for God's wrath. My family, although exhausted with grief and anger, have never stopped fighting for our girls and to protect the world from you. You must be caged like an animal to keep others safe. Just think about that. You must be caged. When you finally take your last undeserving breath, I know then you will ultimately pay for everything you have done, and that is the only piece that we hang on to.
In one sense, it's kind of unbelievable to think she even has the strength to sit there, make a statement like that. Her words were incredibly powerful. And I'm curious, when you listen to that, there are conflicting opinions about the idea of closure. Some people whose loved ones are victims to unspeakable crimes, they say the horror is never truly over. It's never really over. There's never closure. There's others who say, hey, listen, being able to provide a victim impact statement directly to the perpetrator in open court, that means something. It provides a measure of peace. You've been in courtrooms. You've been part of trials for years. What is your position on these victim impact statements and the importance they have? If it doesn't change necessarily the sentence, why is it important?
First of all, it could. If it's not a negotiated plea, it could affect the sentence. But I think it's important for the reasons that you've stated. Like, that's their opportunity to express to the person that's caused this pain to their family how they feel, and publicly, so people can understand their pain. And I think it's important for them, to get that expression out. It's very difficult when dealing with crime like the one that we're talking about. I mean, I've represented a lot of people charged with murder, and a lot of them, like murder for hire, home invasions, people that kill people because they're angry. That's like separate. But I've also had the misfortune of representing sadistic criminals that have murdered for pleasure and for sexual pleasure. And I'm telling you, as a criminal defense attorney, it's a completely different experience when you're face to face with that type of evil. And unfortunately, this poor woman not only came face to face with it, but her family was completely derailed. And she's had to now, muster the strength to stand in front of him and express to her how it feels. So even though I did make the statement about there really is never any closure, something like that could definitely assist her in trying to, move forward with her life as best she can.
Now, I had mentioned before that Callihan had an alleged accomplice, Victoria Cox. So, a Mississippi grand jury actually indicted her for capital murder, kidnapping, sexual battery, the same charges that Callihan faced. However, she has entered a not guilty plea. So her Mississippi trial is scheduled to start in December, and earlier this year, she was also arraigned in Louisiana, accused of being accessory after the fact to murder. She also faces charges there of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping of a child, second-degree kidnapping. Mauricio, do you see her taking a plea as well before these cases make it to trial?
I would say yes, because if you represent someone like her, and I would be trying to avoid trial as best that I can, because in my opinion, there still exists this public thirst for justice. And since this individual has avoided the death penalty, they want to still blame somebody. Like, with these charges in a place like this, I would be trying my best to avoid a trial at all costs. I don't know whether Louisiana is similar to Florida, where all they need is, in Florida, you don't need a unanimous verdict for death. All you need is a majority. That's not hard to do. So I would try why, I mean, listen, I love to go to trial. That's why I became an attorney, but I always tell my clients, I avoid it at all costs, because if your freedom or your life is in the hands of a jury, then you really don't know what's going to happen. And anybody that's been practicing the time that I have will tell you that, because I have lost some of the ones that I should have won, and I've won some of the ones that I should have lost. So you really can't predict what's going to happen in front of a jury.
Interesting you say that there's ones you won that you should have lost. That's interesting you admitted that. Look, Mauricio, this is, we'll see. We'll see what she decides to do. This is an awful, awful, awful case, but I appreciate you coming on and breaking it down for us. Again, really just sad, and we're wishing the family the best as they move on to the next chapter. Thank you, Mauricio.
Thank you for having me.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.